The airport didn't hum. It pulsed, metallic, brisk, and too bright for 6:43 in the morning. Mariah Elise Turner stood just past the sliding glass doors of Terminal C, her suitcase by her ankle and her boarding pass folded perfectly in half inside her jacket pocket. She blinked up at the departure board overhead, watching destinations flip like thoughts. Denver, Atlanta, Seattle. She hugged her sketchbook tighter against her chest. The smell was what hit her first. A chemical mix of jet fuel, coffee, and too many perfumes colliding. But underneath it all was a thread of electricity, the kind that lived in liminal spaces. She felt it everywhere, under her skin, behind her eyes, in the way her breath kept catching at the top of her chest. This was her first flight alone. Remember, her father had said at the drop-off curb, hand heavy and warm on her shoulder, "You don't need permission to be where you already belong." Mariah had nodded, though her stomach had tightened at the time. His words were stitched into her now, repeated like a secret. She wasn't afraid of the plane. She wasn't afraid of being alone. She was afraid of being seen the wrong way. And she knew, even at 13, how often that happened. She moved through security like a note sliding into the wrong key. Offbeat, but careful. The TSA agent barely glanced at her ID before waving her through. Her backpack carried a small white tag with bold red letters. Unaccompanied minor. And her father's business card was tucked into the front pocket in case anyone asked. He'd packed everything himself. Her snacks, her phone charger, her inhaler, and a letter folded 3 times in a hidden zipper pouch. He hadn't let her read it until that morning. If you ever feel nervous, just find a window. Look for the mountains. They always remind you that you're small, but still rising. She hadn't let go of that letter since. Gate A17 was quiet when she arrived. Early flights had a strange hush to them, like the airport hadn't fully woken up. A man in a neon vest swept slowly near the windows, humming something she couldn't name. A mother rocked a fussy toddler by the power outlets. Mariah slid into a chair near the boarding zone and traced the edge of her sketchbook. The plane to Seattle would leave in 40 minutes. She still had time to breathe. From behind the gate desk, a woman stood up and adjusted her blazer like it was part of a performance. Her name tag caught the light. V. Brill. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her lipstick, a deep coral, clashed against her powdered skin. Mariah approached the desk with her pass in hand and her voice calm. She'd practiced this moment. "Excuse me. I'm flying alone today. I'm here for flight 332 to Seattle." The woman didn't look up. She was typing something furiously, keys clacking like rain on tin. After a long beat, she glanced sideways at Mariah, then at her jacket, her hair, her face. Not the pass. Not her name. "Where are your parents?" she asked flatly. Mariah held up her pass. "My dad already boarded. I'm registered as an unaccompanied minor." Ms. Brill finally reached out, but not for the scanner. She took the paper between 2 fingers like it was damp laundry, scanned it for barely a second, and then, without warning, tore it straight down the middle. Mariah's breath caught. "There," Ms. Brill said. "You'll wait here while we figure out who you really are. I've seen enough forged papers to know when something feels off." The gate fell silent around them. A man with a briefcase looked up from his phone. A teenage boy with earbuds pulled one out. No one said anything. Mariah didn't speak, not at first. Her mouth opened, but no sound followed. She looked down at the 2 torn halves of her boarding pass, now limp in Ms. Brill's hand like broken wings. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. "You're being disruptive," Ms. Brill snapped, voice sharp. "Now don't make this harder than it already is." That word, disruptive, rang louder than any shout. It echoed through the tiled floor, down the column of her spine. Disruptive meant problematic. Disruptive meant dangerous. Disruptive, she had learned, was how the world tried to shrink you. "I have my confirmation. My name is—" I said wait. Ms. Brill didn't look at her again. She waved to another attendant, a younger man with an earpiece and nerves scribbled across his face. "Call TSA. We might have a situation." The man hesitated, eyes flitting from Mariah to the gate agent. His badge said Leo. His shoulders tensed. Mariah stepped back slowly, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack. Her fingers closed around the letter from her father. She didn't pull it out. She just held it like armor. Like truth. She wanted someone to say something. The mother with the toddler didn't look her way. The man with the briefcase put his earbuds back in. Leo shifted his weight from one foot to the other, but didn't move. Mariah tried to keep her posture straight. She didn't want to cry. Not here. Not like this. It wasn't fear that rose inside her. It was something else. That old ache. The one she didn't have words for, but felt every time someone looked at her and decided what she wasn't. The intercom chirped. A child's voice laughed somewhere near the snack stand. The world kept moving like this moment didn't matter. But it mattered to her. She glanced at the windows, tried to find the mountains her father had talked about. All she saw was sky, gray, dim, unfeeling. She whispered her name to herself like a spell. Mariah Elise Turner. I belong here. A voice behind her murmured. She didn't even scan it. Mariah turned. A woman in her late 30s had stood from her seat. She had curly auburn hair and kind, tired eyes. She looked directly at Leo, then at Ms. Brill. She handed her pass over like everyone else. She didn't do anything wrong. Leo's mouth opened, then closed. His voice, when it came, was small but clear. I saw her check in an hour ago. She had ID. She was quiet. Followed the rules. Ms. Brill froze, arms folded so tight they trembled. Mariah blinked fast. Her hands had gone cold. In the distance, a security guard approached, broad-shouldered, wearing sunglasses indoors. The kind of presence that made space go quiet. And still, all Mariah could think was, he's going to look at me and see a problem. The security officer's shoes tapped a slow, deliberate rhythm across the floor, like a judge entering a courtroom. The kind of entrance that made people sit up straighter. His mirrored sunglasses reflected the fluorescent ceiling lights, and even though the terminal was warm, he chewed gum with the bored precision of someone waiting for trouble to present itself. Mariah didn't move. She stood exactly where Vanessa Brill had told her to wait, hands curled tightly around the strap of her backpack, her breath feathering unevenly at the top of her lungs. The letter from her father was still pressed to her palm inside her coat pocket, warm now with her grip, the only thing tethering her to the world that had made sense 20 minutes ago. Possible forgery, Vanessa said, stepping forward before the officer could ask a question. She approached the gate alone with a fake pass and became difficult when questioned. She didn't, Leo started, but Vanessa cut him off with a single glance sharp enough to slice through the air between them. The officer's eyes settled on Mariah. Behind the mirrored glass, she couldn't tell what he was seeing. That was the worst part, being watched and not knowing what version of you was being filed away in someone else's mind. You got a guardian here? He asked, his tone neutral, practiced. Mariah drew in a slow breath. My dad's name is Derrick Turner. He's already on the plane. Or, supposed to be. The officer pulled out a tablet and began tapping on the screen, his gum still snapping. Name: Mariah Elise Turner. A long pause stretched between them, the kind that made minutes feel like they might never end. Leo shifted behind the counter, bouncing slightly on the balls of his feet. The woman who'd spoken up earlier hovered nearby, her mouth drawn into a tight line. Passengers behind them had started whispering. A teenager pulled out his phone, pretending to scroll, but obviously listening. Someone muttered, "This is getting ridiculous." Finally, the officer looked up from the screen. We've got 2 Turners on the manifest. Derrick and Mariah. Confirmed unaccompanied minor status. Boarding pass was valid. Vanessa blinked. What? The officer didn't look at her. Systems clean. She was supposed to be on this flight. Leo let out a breath that sounded like relief wrapped in hesitation. I told you. She checked in with me an hour ago. I verified everything. Vanessa's arms folded tighter across her chest. Well, she still shouldn't have approached the gate alone. She didn't do anything wrong, Leo said. His voice was steadier now, each word standing taller than the last. She followed the process. I gave her the go-ahead myself. A murmur rippled through the nearby seats. Mariah remained frozen. Even with confirmation, even with voices starting to rise around her like shields, something in her had curled small. Like the parts of her that wanted to be known were still waiting for permission. The officer stepped back. All good here, he said. Looks like someone jumped the gun. Vanessa's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Her eyes darted to the torn pieces of paper still sitting beside the monitor. Shreds of Mariah's boarding pass, quiet and damning. It should have ended there. But it didn't. Because the silence broke again, not with a shout, not with anger, but with a voice like glass cutting clean through fog. Is there a reason, it said, low and firm, why my daughter isn't on that plane? Every head turned. He wasn't tall in the way people imagined authority. No booming voice. No expensive suit. But Derrick Turner didn't need those things. He wore a slate gray jacket over a white shirt, nothing flashy. His calm was sharper than steel. Leo straightened. "Mr. Turner, I thought you'd already boarded." "I stayed behind to observe," Derrick said. "We've had service issues on this route. I wanted to see things for myself." His eyes found Mariah, and she felt her lungs open like someone had loosened the rope around her chest. "Dad," she said, voice smaller than she meant. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. Not entirely, but she wasn't about to say that here. "She tore up my pass," she whispered. "Said it was fake." Derrick's gaze moved to Vanessa, unreadable. "Did you scan her name?" Well, no. I didn't get that far." "Did you check the UM list?" "I didn't think I needed to." "You didn't think," he echoed, voice calm. "You assumed." Her face flushed. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "She followed every rule," Leo said. "She did everything right." "And yet," Derrick said, nodding toward the scraps of paper, "this is what she got in return." Vanessa's stance cracked for the first time. Her arms dropped to her sides, fingers fidgeting against her clipboard. She looked, for a fleeting moment, like she might apologize. But instead, she said, "I didn't know who she was." Derrick tilted his head. "That's the problem," he said. "It shouldn't matter who she is." A hush settled across the gate. Not the heavy kind from before, but one full of listening. Mariah felt it. The way the air shifted when truth entered a space and refused to back down. The woman who had spoken earlier stepped closer. Your daughter was calm. Polite. She showed her ticket. This didn't feel like protocol. It felt like something else. Derrick offered her a small nod. "Thank you." Behind the gate desk, Vanessa shifted toward the terminal computer, pretending to check seating charts that didn't need checking. Her shoulders were drawn in now, her confidence fraying under the weight of too many eyes. Leo leaned toward his headset, requesting supervisor to gate A17. Immediate. Mariah watched her father carefully. Not the way he spoke, but the way he carried himself. Measured. Composed. Unshaken. He wasn't making a scene. He was revealing one. She reached into her pocket and unfolded the letter. She didn't need to read it to know what it said. It said, "You have nothing to prove." Vanessa was retreating now, into silence, into the rigid comfort of routine. But the moment had already bloomed too large to stuff back behind a counter. Mariah stepped closer to her father, standing tall beside him. "I just wanted to get to my seat," she said, voice clearer now. "That's all I came to do." Derrick didn't touch her shoulder. He didn't need to. The space between them spoke volumes. The gate, once a threshold of hope, had become a battleground. And Mariah, still standing, had not disappeared. Not this time. The supervisor arrived 7 minutes later, walking with the clipped urgency of someone who already knew a storm was waiting. His badge caught the overhead lights. P. Morales, Terminal Operations, and his eyes swept across the gathering with quiet calculation. He took in the torn ticket scraps on the desk, the woman shrinking behind the counter, the man with calm steel in his posture, and the girl standing beside him like a flag still flying. "Mr. Turner," he said, offering a hand. "Apologies for the delay. We were just informed of the situation." Derrick nodded but didn't shake. "I'd like a report filed. I want confirmation that my daughter will board without further interference. And I want footage reviewed, starting from the moment she stepped up to this counter." Morales inclined his head. "Understood. We'll begin an internal review immediately." "She'll be reissued a boarding pass?" Derrick asked. "Yes, sir. I'll handle that myself." The formality hung in the air like mist over cold asphalt. It was what professionalism looked like in damage control, efficient, impersonal, and a few minutes too late. Behind the desk, Vanessa busied herself rechecking flight manifests that didn't need checking. Her face had stiffened into something unreadable, but the edges of her composure were starting to curl. No one was shouting. No one was causing a scene. That made it worse. This wasn't public humiliation. It was accountability, and it didn't have to be loud to cut deep. Mariah stayed still, her fingers tightening slightly around the letter in her pocket. She hadn't read it since the car ride, but the words still hummed against her skin. Derrick turned toward Vanessa now, slowly, like someone lowering the volume before saying something important. "You didn't just tear up a boarding pass," he said quietly. "You tore up a moment my daughter had looked forward to for weeks." Vanessa paused mid-gesture, her hand frozen on the keyboard. I made a judgment call, she said. No, Derrick replied, his voice like smooth granite. You made a judgment. Full stop. She turned toward him, defensive instincts rising, arms folding again like armor. Are you accusing me of something? I'm pointing out something that already happened. Vanessa's eyes flicked to Morales, searching for backup. He didn't offer any. You made a decision about my daughter, Derrick said. Before she spoke. Before you scanned her name. Before you did your job. You looked at her and decided something. I was protecting the integrity of the flight, she said, trying to sound official, but the words felt hollow, like furniture arranged for a guest who'd already left. And the inconsistency was what? Derrick asked, his voice still level. A quiet child standing in line with a valid ticket? Vanessa's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The security officer had lingered near the edge of the group, watching. He stepped forward now, not to intervene, but to confirm. We double-checked. Her status was in the system. Clean. She was on the list. No issues. Leo cleared his throat. I verified it myself when she checked in. I asked for ID, saw her name, printed the tag. There were no red flags. Derrick nodded once. So again, why was her ticket destroyed? Vanessa's cheeks had begun to pale. Her gaze shifted between them, then dropped to the floor. I thought, she began, but Derrick raised a hand. Not angrily, not to silence, but to stop the unraveling before it became an excuse. You didn't think twice. Not until you realized who I was. And even then, you weren't sorry. You were scrambling. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was precise. Around them, passengers had resumed their routines, checking phones, sipping coffee, glancing sideways. But a pocket of stillness remained where truth had taken root. Morales exhaled, slow and controlled. Mr. Turner, we'll place Ms. Brill on administrative leave pending full review. Your daughter will board first. I assure you, this will be handled thoroughly. That's not enough, Derrick said, his eyes still on Vanessa. She saw what she wanted to see, not what was there. Mariah's chest ached, not with pain, with the sharp, sudden release of tension, like a violin string finally loosened. She looked up at her father, the quiet steadiness in his face, and then at Vanessa, whose shoulders had finally slumped beneath the weight of what she'd done. A woman stepped forward from the row of seats. It was the one who had spoken earlier, now joined by a tall man with salt and pepper hair. I saw it too, the woman said. Your daughter didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause trouble. She was respectful. She followed the rules. The man nodded. Most kids would have cried or run. She didn't flinch. Mariah felt heat bloom behind her eyes. She blinked hard, jaw clenched. She's been taught not to, Derrick said. Leo returned from the desk, holding a crisp new boarding pass. She's confirmed in first class. No charge. Derrick took it but didn't look at it. Thank you, he said. Not for the seat. For speaking up earlier. That took something. Leo gave a single nod, then turned back to the counter. Mariah stared at the pass in her father's hand. Do I really have to sit up front? A quiet chuckle escaped him. No, but you've earned it. They walked toward the jet bridge, side by side. Not hurried, not afraid, just forward. Inside the aircraft, a woman in her 40s greeted them in the navy uniform of the airline. But her eyes were warm, and her voice was steady. Mr. Turner, she said, we're sorry about what happened at the gate. We've informed the crew. Your daughter will be well taken care of. Mariah offered a small nod, her voice still locked in her throat. Her father guided her to seat 2A and placed the boarding pass gently on the tray table. Then he crouched beside her, at eye level. You good to fly? Mariah hesitated. Yeah, she said, though it sounded more like a question than an answer. She glanced out the window. The sun had climbed halfway up the sky, and Mount Shasta was visible in the far-off haze, its peak frosted with snow, powdered like sugar. I just didn't get why she looked at me like that, she murmured. Derrick didn't respond right away. His gaze drifted back toward the door of the plane, then down to her hands, still balled in her lap. She saw something that wasn't there, he said finally. She saw a threat where there was none. That wasn't your fault. Mariah nodded, but her chest still felt tight. I didn't like it. You're not supposed to. He stood and smoothed his coat, but paused at the edge of the aisle. You don't let her keep that power. You draw it out of you. You turn it into something. Mariah nodded again, this time firmer. He stepped off the plane without another word. The door sealed behind him. The hum of the cabin filled her ears. Air vents, overhead bins closing, flight attendants moving in quiet choreography. The world hadn't stopped, but something in her had shifted. She reached into her backpack, pulled out her sketchbook, and opened to a fresh page. With slow, deliberate strokes, she began to draw. A mountain, a girl, a torn ticket being pieced back together, not perfectly, but with gold lines through the cracks. And a plane, rising. The plane had climbed beyond the clouds, into that quiet space where the sky no longer argued with the weather. A blanket of white stretched beneath them like an unbroken sheet, soft and endless. Mariah sat pressed against the window, knees tucked beneath her, sketchbook balanced on the tray table. The seat beside her remained empty, though she could still feel her father's presence in it, like warmth that lingered after someone leaves a room. She'd drawn most of the page already. A silhouette of a girl with a backpack, a long runway, a sky cracked with lightning and stitched back together with gold. The torn ticket floated in the air above her, not ruined but transformed, patched with stars instead of tape. Her pencil moved slowly now. The pressure behind her eyes had dulled, but hadn't left. She wasn't crying. She hadn't since the gate. But something still sat heavy beneath her ribs. Anger, maybe. Or confusion. Or both. Braided so tightly, she couldn't tell one from the other. A soft voice pulled her from the drawing. "Would you like anything, sweetheart? Water? Juice?" Mariah turned. A flight attendant stood beside her, mid-40s, brown skin, tired eyes, but kind. She wore the same Navy uniform as Vanessa Brill, but it looked different on her, softer somehow. "Real. Water, please," Mariah said, her voice quiet but steady. The woman returned with a chilled bottle and a paper cup. She set them down gently, then crouched to Mariah's level. "We heard what happened," she said. "I want you to know, it shouldn't have. And I'm sorry." Mariah nodded. She didn't have the energy to say thank you. But the woman seemed to understand. "You let us know if you need anything, all right?" She stood and moved down the aisle, her presence like a warm note in a song that had almost gone cold. Mariah took a sip of water, then pulled out her father's letter again. The creases were soft from being held so long. She opened it slowly and read the last lines once more. "People may not always see you clearly, but you are not here to fit their expectations. You're here to fly." She folded it again and slid it into her sketchbook. Across the aisle, a man in a denim jacket leaned slightly toward her, voice low enough not to intrude. "That your dad back there?" he asked. Mariah nodded. He handled himself real calm. "Most folks would have lost it. He's been teaching me not to." The man nodded. "Shows. My grandson's your age. He's got to do the same sometimes. It's not fair, but he's strong for it." Mariah didn't answer, but the words landed somewhere real. "Keep your head up," the man said, and then turned back to his magazine. She glanced back out the window. Mountains rose in the distance now, blue-gray peaks powdered with snow. Her dad had told her to look for them, said they looked like paintings from this high up. He was right. She reached for her pencil again. The rest of the flight passed in quiet turns. A nap, a safety demo, the gentle murmur of passengers finding their silence. When the plane began its descent into Seattle, Mariah felt it in her stomach. The flutter of arrival, the question of what came next. When the wheels touched down, she didn't cheer. She didn't smile. But she felt something settle. Not closure. Not yet. But the first step toward it. A woman in a dark blazer stood waiting at the gate when the doors opened. She wore an airline badge and held a tablet with Mariah's name on it. "Miss Turner," she asked, "I'll be your escort to baggage claim. Your father informed us." Mariah stood, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and followed. As they moved through the terminal, a message buzzed on her phone. "Dad, let me know when you land. Proud of you." She typed back. "Landed. I'm okay." But she wasn't sure if that was entirely true. Outside, Seattle's sky was muted but open. People hurried past them, lost in their own arrivals, their own burdens. She wondered how many of them had ever been looked at like she'd been looked at that morning. How many had gone invisible while standing right in front of someone? Before she stepped into the waiting car, she paused and turned back toward the terminal. She didn't know why. Maybe to remind herself it had really happened. That she hadn't imagined the way the air changed when her name was questioned. Back in Sacramento, her father was likely still at the terminal, still talking with supervisors, maybe in a back office reviewing security footage. He had told her he'd handle the report himself. "This one's personal," he had said before she boarded. She hadn't understood how much he meant that until now. The car pulled away from the curb. At the next red light, she opened her sketchbook again and turned to the last page. The mountain was still there. The stitched sky. The floating ticket. But now she added something new. A gate. Not broken. Not guarded. Just open. She drew herself walking through it. Alone, but not afraid. The night settled around Derrick Turner's office like a quiet question. The glow from the floor lamp caught the edges of papers spread across his desk. Incident reports, policy outlines, and a yellow legal pad scribbled with notes he'd made during his long walk back from Terminal C. He sat with his elbows resting on the desk, the stillness of the room pressing in like altitude. On his screen was an open email draft addressed to the executive team. Subject: Gate A17 incident. Immediate action required. But it was the message he'd already sent hours earlier that sat with more weight. Security footage flagged. Recommendation: full internal review. Retraining required. Bias recognition and unaccompanied minor protocol overhaul. This one's personal. D. Turner. He leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, and let the silence stretch. No satisfaction lived in this room. No sense of having won. What had happened at the gate wasn't rare. That was the part people didn't understand. It wasn't a shock. It was a pattern, one his daughter had walked straight into without ever choosing to. And that pattern had finally crossed the wrong threshold. A soft chime broke the stillness. His phone buzzed on the edge of the desk. Mariah, 6:32 p.m. They let us build drones today. Mine flew straight into a tree. Derrick smiled, small but real. He tapped out a reply. At least it took off. You okay otherwise? It took a moment for her response to come. Yeah. One of the kids from Texas asked me what I want to be when I grow up. I said I don't know. He said, you look like you're gonna run stuff one day. His smile deepened into something quieter, something proud. He's not wrong. I know, she replied. I'm gonna keep it. He paused, then typed one last thing. Love you, Mari. Her answer came without delay. Love you too. He set the phone down, exhaled, and let the silence return, not heavy this time, but steady. The kind of quiet that meant something had shifted and wouldn't go back to how it was. Across the city, Mariah sat cross-legged on the top bunk of her camp cabin. The window beside her was cracked open, letting in the sound of wind threading through trees. Her sketchbook rested on her lap. She wasn't drawing anymore, just tracing the lines of the last image she'd made. Her walking through the open gate, head held high. The cabin lights had dimmed. Most of the other girls had already crawled into bed, whispering about drones, and who liked who, and what snack they missed most from home. Mariah didn't join in. Not because she fell apart, but because for the first time that day, she was full. Full of thought, of truth, of something earned. She pulled the letter from the back cover of her sketchbook one more time. The paper was worn now, softened at the corners. But the words still held. Look at the mountains. You'll feel small, but still rising. She folded it slowly and slid it into the book's spine, then placed it beside her pillow. Across the room, her bunkmate stirred. Hey, the girl said sleepily. That was your dad who started the airline, right? Mariah nodded, though she wasn't sure the girl could see her in the dark. He seems cool, she added. You do too. Mariah didn't answer right away. Then, soft as the breeze slipping through the window, she whispered, thanks. She lay back, arms behind her head, watching a shadow from the window drift across the ceiling. And she breathed, deep and steady. In the days that followed, the airline launched a system-wide training initiative. Supervisors were briefed. Gate agents were rotated. Language around disruption and suspicion was formally redefined. Not because it was good PR, but because the head of the company stood in front of his staff and said, we cannot pretend to stand for equity at 30,000 feet if we abandon it on the ground. Vanessa Brill was placed on administrative leave. She was offered retraining. She took it, not because she believed she'd done something terrible, but because something in her shifted the longer the silence followed her. In the quiet of her small kitchen one night, she told her husband, I didn't see her. Not really. I just reacted. He didn't say much, only nodded and reached across the table to cover her hand with his. She didn't lose her job, but she lost the certainty that she had always been right. And sometimes, that's where change begins. Leo, the attendant with the headset, was promoted 2 months later. Not because he'd spoken up that day, but because when the moment arrived, he chose the truth, even when it came with risk. At the team meeting where his promotion was announced, he said, "The way we show up for each other, especially when no one's watching, is who we really are." People remembered that. And Mariah? She finished her week at camp with a drone that finally flew straight. On the last day, she stood before her group and shared her favorite part of the week. Her voice didn't shake when she said, "Learning how to fix what crashed." She came home quieter, but stronger. She still drew in her sketchbook, more now. The pages filled with skies, runways, faces she remembered, and gates, always gates. Open, lit, waiting. At her kitchen table one evening, she handed her father a new drawing. It was of him, standing next to her at the airport. One of his hands was resting on her shoulder. The other was holding something gold and glowing. At first he thought it was the torn ticket, pieced back together. But when he looked closer, he realized what it was. It was her. And in the corner of the page, in her tidy block letters, she'd written, "Some people build airlines. Some build ways through." He looked at her across the table, his heart fuller than words could hold. And Mariah just smiled, leaned her chin on her palm, and said, "I want to fly again." When she stepped onto her next plane, months later, to visit her aunt in Chicago, no one stopped her. No one questioned the ticket or her name. The attendant greeted her with a smile that reached her eyes. And Mariah walked through the gate like she belonged. Because she always had. This is not just a story about a child at an airport. It's a story about quiet strength, about how bias, silence, and snap judgments can wound, isolate, and diminish those who deserve to be seen and uplifted. The protagonist doesn't need to shout to be heard. She chooses to stand tall, to hold her dignity even when she's doubted or dismissed. Her courage lives in stillness, in her calm refusal to be erased, and in the quiet power of knowing her worth. This story is also for those who choose to speak up, for the ones who stand beside the truth, for parents who protect their children fiercely, and for bystanders who decide that silence is no longer an option. If you've ever felt unwelcome in a place where you had every right to belong, remember this. You don't need permission to exist. You matter. Your presence is powerful. Your story is worth telling. Be the one who opens the gate, and be the reason the sky stays wide and free. To continue experiencing inspiring stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Our Life Stories. Our upcoming videos will continue to share powerful tales of courage, resilience, and life lessons that will motivate and empower you. Don't miss out. Subscribe now, and thank you for your support.